Hi, I'm Anna, a licensed social worker interviewing social workers, and my guest today is Miss Resia Cooper. She is an MSW. She is the engagement coordinator for New Jersey and Delaware chapters, the NASW. She shares her journey on YouTube as a content creator, and she is also a fellow alumna of Fordham University.
So, hi, everyone. I'm Resia. I am a social worker, like Anna said. I am an alum of Fordham University as well. I graduated in 2022. I can't believe I'm about to be at the 1 year mark, but I'm super excited about that. I'm a military spouse. I have two little babies. They're not babies anymore, but I have two small kids, and
You like their babies, yeah.
yeah, I have two small kids and they are my world. But more importantly, I'm a social worker, as Anna has alluded to. And I do currently serve as the engagement coordinator for two chapters of NASW. And that's New Jersey and Delaware. So I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I would love to hear a bit about how you decided to become a social worker, what your journey kind of leading up to that was.
How did I decide to become a social worker? I think that's a tricky question because I came into the profession not too sure where I would land. Um, I tell people all the time, I was one of those people that believed wholeheartedly that all social workers did was take children because that's what I saw. That's the lens I saw growing up in New York City. Like when you see the social worker, somebody's mama or papa is going through a CPS case. So that is what I thought of when it came to the social work profession. So I never wanted to be a social worker. Quite honestly, I was in school to become a physician assistant
Mm.
because I really thought, like, I want to serve people. And I was like, why not do it through that lens and that avenue? And we moved to Germany in 2016, I think, or 2017. And it was when I was there, really, to be quite honest, that I started to realize that social work was such a broad profession. I would like casually walk through like the educational center and talk to the employees because I was a military spouse with no real job, right? But I love to talk to people. That's the fact. And I met a social worker and she was doing administrative work. And I was like, oh, I never really thought about that. And that's how I started to research because by nature, I'm a researcher. So I started to research and I was like, wow, this is like a whole other side of social work. And that's when I decided to like start my journey through social work. So yeah.
That's cool. And something that stuck out to me that I heard you say was whenever you were thinking about becoming a physician's assistant and in school for that, like you wanted to serve people. And I think that's something that so often people come into a field and they're like, oh, I just want to help people. But then it's cool to see people's journeys into like how I'm going to use social work as an avenue to help people and like for my future profession. So it's cool that you landed on that and saw a different opportunity there.
Yeah, it is. I love social work.
Yeah. What does your current position entail? Like which area of social work are you in? What do you do?
So I tell people I'm a macro social worker because that is what, if we were to categorize it, my work falls more, or it aligns more, I should say, with the macro space.
Mhm.
Um, I currently serve in my role, and what I do for the most part is I identify speakers. I create engagement opportunities. I focus on our student members, and I make sure that they transition from student membership to full membership without missing a beat. Part of my job is really just creating a space that I felt wasn't there when I was an intern, and really mapping it out. There really isn't a blueprint for my job. Some days you might find me in back to back meetings trying to secure speakers, and other days you might find me on a call about legislation and what's going on within the profession and talking to those key stakeholders. And other days you might find me traveling across the world to various conferences just to see what innovative things are happening and how it aligns with the profession of social work. So that's what I do.
That's cool. That's very cool. It's like helping social work be a profession that social workers can work in. That's awesome. Is that something that you pictured yourself getting into?
Um, I knew for sure I didn't want to do therapy, and I didn't want to do anything clinical. Like I said, I like to talk,
Mhm.
um, and I tend to be the friend that friends come to for advice. So before I even joined the profession, I was already burnt out with like helping people navigate their own challenges in life. So I knew that wasn't for me. I knew for sure I wasn't going to do therapy, but I
Mhm.
did not know what I was going to land on. I would say, I just started to explore social work and then I started to like align it with what I like. So when I was a master's student, I realized like, okay, the retention rate in higher education for students that are minorities or Latinx or BIPOC is not as high as our other counterparts, right? So I knew for me, I wanted to become like someone that can support those groups and individuals. And as I started to navigate that, I started like creating social media content on social work and the profession. And it really just enveloped to this love and passion for social work students. So I really did not expect to be doing what I am doing now, but I would say that I was able to curate an opportunity for me that really aligns with my own personal passions. And yeah.
That's awesome. And that is so cool because in school for social work, you get so many, like your toolbox becomes so big of like the hard skills and the soft skills and everything you learn how to do, and being able to fit those skills into a position that, yeah, like plays on your strengths and empowers people and becomes a person that you wish maybe was there whenever you were in school is something that is very fulfilling, it seems like.
I'm enjoying it so far. Can't
That's
complain.
awesome. I would love to hear about your like degree experience, where you went to school, and what that MSW was like to get.
So I said this already. I graduated from Fordham. So let's go Rams. I'm
Hmm.
gonna
Yeah,
spin the
that's what Resia
percussion
and I were in
pop.
the same cohort. Never
We
had class
were,
together,
we
but
never had a class together.
yeah.
I think you found me on YouTube and you was like,
Yes.
"Oh, I'm in this program. I'm
It's like you
graduating
just casually
today."
mentioned Fordham University, and I was like, what?
So I went to Fordham, and when I was starting my MSW journey, I knew that I wanted to find a program that resonated with me, but also a program that would work with what I wanted to do. So I started doing this deep dive of like what social work programs have administrative tracks, and I applied to quite a few schools, and thankfully I was on the receiving end of getting into those programs. But Fordham really just pulled at my heartstrings. You know, it was the little things that they did, like calling me on the phone continuously to check on me, see how the application process was going, seeing if I needed any support in anything. And then having that pathway where we can kind of, I always tell people at Fordham, you can kind of build your own track. I love that for myself, right? I love that I wasn't boxed into taking these specific classes along my journey, but I was able to use more electives to my benefit to pick what I really wanted to learn in my graduate experience. So I went to Fordham, and I would say that the experience was amazing. I was only there for 8 months, so I can't speak about like campus life and what to expect if you live there or if you're in a 2-year program or the traditional program. But I do know for my 8 months there, I was able to do amazing things. I was able to like sit on a committee. I was able to meet amazing professors. I was able to bring like a council member to Fordham. And I think that for me, I felt like attending Fordham allowed me to be who I was, and not shrink back from that in any way. But I was able to really shine as a student, right? So I was able to insert what I like to do and how I like to see things, and implement it. So yeah.
That's really cool. And yeah, I think that's a big thing is you hear so often about like, oh, this is the best school for a program. Like this is the best, like top whatever, but really finding one that aligns with like what you need and want and feels personable. Like it's not just, oh, I'm just a student getting this degree. It's like, oh no, they know me. Like they know who I am and like, yeah, what I'm learning. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah, I
What
always tell students that, like, if you're looking for a program, I think people come to me often, like, how can I get into the best social work program? And like you said, I tell them it's really not about the best program, but it's about the best fit for you. So, like, really doing a deep dive on like what's the mission of this school, right? What they align with, right? What have I seen them do in the past? Where are their students working? And ask yourself, like, how does that really resonate with me, and does that work for my future? So
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I know that you wore a lot of hats, like had a lot of different roles while being a grad student as well. How did you handle that? What was the workload and being a mom and all of that?
listen, I tell people all the time, if you do not plan, if you do not have a plan, you are not going to succeed. I remember when I got into the program, the advanced standing program, where it's 15 credits a semester. So that was a lot of classes. I think I took 5 classes every semester, had an internship both semesters. I do have small kids, and I'm a mom, I'm a wife. I have so many other things that I was doing. And then I also have my own passions, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had to live and breathe by a planner. I tell people all the time, like, if you do not plan for the day, you're not going to succeed. So you have to be intentional about carving that time and planning. I would plan everything. Like, I would color code, like, okay, this assignment is due. I had to make sure that I was on top of it so that I wasn't drowning. And then I had to give myself like margins, like, what if a kid gets sick? So I made sure that I planned out like mishaps. So I can stay on top of it. So that's the only way I really did it. I don't I don't know. And a lot of praying. I prayed every single day. I was like, just let me make it to the end. Like, I remember there was one point I was like, this is not gonna work. This is crazy people stuff. And I did it.
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing too, is like you made it, got through. Did you find that you were able to work self-care type things into school, like while you were there? How did you do that?
Self-care is number one. I always tell people, if anything is going to um keep me away from making appointments for myself with myself, I don't want it. I think oftentimes we think that we just have to do and do and do and get burnt out. And then at the point of burnout, that's when we're like, oh, I need me time.
Mm.
My planner had self-care time planned into it. Like, I was serious about living by this planner, but I made sure like every Saturday I would give myself time to sleep in. So I've created boundaries, right? So I didn't take Saturday classes. Um, I think I took a Saturday class my first semester, and I was like, never again on a Saturday am I going to be here at 8 a.m. Okay.
Mm.
It's not going to happen for them. Get somebody else to do it.
Right.
So I was adamant about like just curating like what I wanted. So self-care was on the top of the list. I always tell people social workers don't really care about themselves. Um, and I think it's a disservice, right? Because we always tell our clients, or we tell the people that we interact with, like, make sure you're, pouring from an empty glass. And then here we are, like, pouring from the bottom of the glass. Like, there's literally droplets. And we're like, okay, I still got to do one more thing. So it was important to me to do self-care, and I made sure I scheduled them bubble baths. Like, I wasn't doing elaborate things. I
Mm.
think the biggest thing I did was after graduation, I went and I had like a trip to Jamaica. That was like my big self-care thing. But throughout the semester, whether it was like running a bath or carving out 30 minutes in the morning just to drink my tea with
Mm.
no interruptions, I made sure I did something for Ray. So
Yeah, I feel like I'm pretty similar to you in that sense, where like my planner would have a chunk of time. It's like, just because this time doesn't have something written does not mean it is free. Like,
hello.
that is mine.
Hello. And even like as a working professional, like my calendar, I have like 3 hours that is like for the week that I'm like, okay, these are hours that I'm not focusing on work, but I really have to make sure that I'm doing something for me, right? If I
Mm.
really value myself as a social worker and I value this profession, I can't, not this early on, right, be so disgruntled or
Mhm.
upset or dissatisfied. So even for me, like, I do little things. Like, I always tell people on Mondays, I do not take meetings before 11 a.m. unless it's internal, right? If it's an external meeting, I'm not doing it. My calendar is closed off. Okay. Because I need to regroup from the weekend and come back and have that time to prioritize what I have to do for the week. So
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think sometimes people will view it as almost like a badge of honor if you like do too much. Like you're like, oh, I'm working so hard. Whereas really people aren't going to remember you for staying an extra 30 minutes, but they will remember you if you like have a personality and like are joyful and like can be yourself or like be a good family member or whatever it may be. So that is a good example to see of yeah, boundaries that are
you like
successful.
as social workers, whether you're a student or you're like an emerging professional or you've been here for years, like, creating those boundaries. And I always tell people, I don't even call it self-care anymore. I call it me time.
Mm.
Um, because it's important, right? I think we have glamorized self-care to this thing where it's like, oh, I got to get a massage, or I have to be going to this like secluded part of the cabin and making everything aesthetically pleasing for this moment, where the reality is just like self-care is pouring back into you. So whether that's reading a book, which is something like I was telling a colleague yesterday, I was like, part of my self-care now is like I like fiction books, right? So I literally 2 nights ago sat through a book and read 180 pages,
That's awesome.
right? Because I had the freedom and the flexibility to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is cool. And being able to be intentional with it, where it's like I'm spending this time because I like myself and because I want to enjoy being here. Because like you said, like with a massage, you could go get a massage and then it doesn't actually make you feel better. Like you're still just upset, you're still burnt out. Or you can set those boundaries and have that intentional time of like, I'm gonna enjoy my cup of tea this morning and I'm gonna love it. Which really is, yeah, game changing.
And knowing what self-care means to you is important. I think like oftentimes you hear people saying like, oh, I have the self-care thing, the self-care retreat. It's always these like, I'm not going to say expensive things, but there are things that are marketed as self-care, right? And it's like, is it really self-care? Like what's self-care for you? So
Yeah.
that's one of the things I ask my students, like when they call me and they're like, oh, I'm having a rough day in my program. And I'm like, what have you done for you? And they're like, well, I can't afford to do this. Okay, what do you like to do?
Yeah,
Right.
because you have to make it to graduation. Like it doesn't matter if you have the degree if you lost yourself somewhere along the way. What advice, kind of going along with that, would you have for prospective social work students or someone who's new coming in?
I guess the biggest advice I would say to anyone that's new to the profession or like exploring, entering the profession is like, I don't know, it's like a diagram in my head. Like, like when there's like a circle and then like you're in the middle of the circle and then like social work is around and it becomes your world, it becomes your everything. I would say make sure it's the other way around. Make sure that you're around and the inside is social work, the core. And the reason why I say that is I think like when we flow from our core, things are less likely to irritate us or to aggravate us, right? Because we have like a bigger why as
Mm,
to why we're doing something. So if you're a new student, I would ask you like, what is your why? And how can you grab hold of that and remember it along the journey? Like, and
mhm,
not just become so distracted, I would say, or enamored with like being a social worker or having this license or doing it this one way. But how does this profession add to your why? And how can you use it as like a foundation? That's really
mhm,
what it is. It's really a foundation to you doing what you want to do.
mhm. Yeah, that is really cool to hear. And that was a good mental image too of the circle and what's on the outside. Yeah, what is the all encompassing and yeah, who you are. With that, what does inspire you? Like what keeps you going as a social worker?
I think I'm a new social worker, so I think what keeps me going is just the high of being here, like making it.
Mm,
Um, I don't know how I'll feel in like 5 years, but I feel like for right now, um, what keeps me really motivated is that I'm doing what I love.
mm,
And I hope that I never become so focused on like titles or like the monetary gain that I forget my why and I forget why I'm doing it, right? I came into this profession really confused as to what I wanted to do, like where I wanted my niche to be, how I wanted it to look, right?
mm,
Um, and now I'm reimagining it in a way where I'm the star player, right? This is the Resia show. This is how does Resia want to show up as a social worker? Um, and I'm having so much fun, like actually putting that into practice, like doing
mm.
what I love to do. So
Yeah. Is there anybody that has like inspired you along the way? Like whether it was when you were getting your degree or choosing or now?
for sure, like there are so many people that I could like accredit to like me being who I am. Like I have phenomenal mentors.
Mm,
I actually have two social work mentors. And it's so funny because they're in two different lanes of social work. One is like uh administrative all the way. She has literally done all the things when it comes to higher education. And then I have another one who is more on the clinical side. But if it was to be someone that people would know, I would say the one person that I think really inspired me is Dr. King. I think just growing up and learning about how radically he fought for the civil rights movement and how he really was a social worker at heart, um, and how he embodied the ethics that we live on as social workers and how he did it even if it costed him his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
That motivates me, right? To show up every day, not to lose myself, right? And I don't mean like if I die, but I mean like not to lose myself in the cause, but to show up because this cause is important to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he really is a good example of paving a new way too, because he didn't necessarily follow exactly in the footsteps of anybody else. He found a way that worked and organized a community and was willing to lead when necessary. So that is cool to hear that he played a role in, yeah, you keep going too.
Definitely played a role, and I tell people that all the time. Like even entering into this profession, it's intimidating, right? Because you graduated with me, so I'm pretty sure you heard people say like you're not going to make money or you have
Right.
to be clinical. I've had so many naysayers on this
Mm-hmm.
journey, right? Like I've had people tell me straight up like you're insane to think that you're going to impact like the social work profession if you don't go through this pathway. And at one point, I started taking all these clinical classes because I was like, well, if this is the only pathway, I have to ensure that I do it. But then I started to ask myself, like, being a social worker is not whether you're clinical, whether you're micro, meso, or macro, but it's really about who you are at your core and living out those ethics that I kind of say, let's take us oath to,
Yeah.
but that's what it really is, right? So even on this journey for me, it's like, okay, Resia, you don't want to be clinical. So how do you provide yourself opportunities to be in the right spaces and to make those impacts and to reach the demographic that you really want to reach? So yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that like I keep hearing from people how so many of us had preconceptions about what social work was before we got into it, like whether it was just child protective services or even like just therapy, and how seeing someone who was a social worker doing something different like impacted us. So I think it's very cool that you've chosen to share your journey online too, to an extent, so that other people see like, oh, this is an option. Like if I am interested in this, social work is a path that I could use to get there. Could you speak a little bit on like that decision, I guess, with like the YouTube videos you make and kind of how you decided to do that, what that's been like?
I think the main reason why I started making the YouTube videos it wasn't because I wanted to, but I think as I started searching like for social workers, right, I would put specific things in Google or YouTube because everyone's at YouTube, TikTok, and I wasn't finding the answers that I wanted. Like, although I was finding social workers that were doing great things,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't resonate with me, right? Um, and I always felt like the outcast, right? Because like even in my classes, people would be talking about their internships, and I'd be like, "What are you talking about?" Right? Because I had no frame of reference of what was going on. Like I understood to a certain degree because I have the educational background, but it was just like a whole new world, right? And even when I would talk to other interns, and they'll be like, "Oh, you don't go to an office, like you do all of this remotely, like how did you secure that, like how did you get this gig, right?" And I was like, yo, we are really like closed-minded as social workers. um which is why I really was like, okay, I'm going on YouTube, I'm gonna tell my story. I'm not gonna, I can't, there's a lot of things I can't divulge, right? Because I do
Right.
work for the National Association, but I try to share what it looks like to one, work remote, one, have amazing opportunities as a social worker. Even as a social work student, like I was able to learn things that other social work students weren't learning, right? Like how to table at a conference, how to put together a conference, right?
Yeah.
How to run a
It's big.
budget, you know, things that people in my cohort was like, what, you went to a conference and you set up a table and you spoke during lunch? Like, what are you talking about? Right.
Mhm.
And I was like, this is the things that they don't teach us. Right. And I wanted to let people know that this is an option. Like you can do this. You don't have to go down one track. And I'm happy that I have been graced and I was fortunate enough to meet social workers that are very progressive
Mhm.
and futuristic, that I don't feel as awkward now as I felt when I was a student. And I think that's really why I do YouTube, right? I want that 1%, or I should say 5%, because that's the actual number, to feel like there's a space for them, even if it's not in the classroom.
Mhm. Yeah. There's something about, yeah, video content like that where it's like, oh, you're a real person and like this is your real journey. And like maybe it's not always easy, or maybe you don't always know exactly where you're headed, but you end up somewhere and it might be different than other social workers or clinical social workers, but it's an option. So that is so cool
And
to hear
aspire
that.
for the difference, like I think that's the real purpose of me showing myself to YouTube and being vulnerable. Is I want people to feel like, okay, I can aspire to be different, and then I could create a plan to become different, right? Or to do different. Like you don't have to do it the same way. Like my job, we're actually hosting a conference at the end of this month, and we're doing like a full student summit at the conference, right? And a lot of people's like, oh, you're having students come to a conference and you have like your own mini conference for them. And I'm like, yeah, like how many times did a social work student come to a regular conference and the content, was it beneficial? Right.
Mhm.
And I say that to say, like, if I didn't bet on Resia and bet on the ability that I know that I have,
Mhm.
to advocate for what students need, I don't think that social work students in New Jersey would get the things that they're getting now. So, yeah.
Yeah, because it is more niche, definitely within the field of you're empowering future social workers, and then they're going to go out and like the web of impact is just going to keep growing because
Oh.
if they felt poured into, now they have more in them to pour into other areas, which is huge. That's so cool. Well, I so appreciate you sharing your insight and your journey. If people do want to keep up with you, where can they find you, whether it's YouTube or whatever you want to share?
Find me on YouTube. I think my name is Resia J. They can find me on Instagram, obviously, at Resia J. And then I do some things on TikTok, and I think it's like Resia J underscore social worker. But I will provide you with all the information if I butchered anything. But you can find me, and I am a real person, so you can say
As a
hey.
subscriber of Resia, I can recommend the YouTube channel. Yeah, it's so cool to one, just the fact that like, yeah, we graduated at the same time, went through the same program, but also now we're like doing such different things. So it's cool to see how so many similarities can also branch out and be so different at the same time.
I'm looking at your story. I'm like, oh my gosh, like she's doing great things. And it's good to see that, like, we both came into the profession at the same time, but we didn't allow like that fear of being the newbie to
Mhm.
like, I always tell people when you graduate, don't really, it does matter because you need your degree,
Right,
but it doesn't take away from your expertise and what
right.
you.
There's no box that can hold you in. Well, thank you so much. It's been so great to talk to you.
Great talking to you too.